The surrogate had carried the babies to term. Two tiny, perfect lives she'd grown to love with every heartbeat. But when the day finally came and she handed them over, their mother looked away. Stella refused to hold them, said she wasn't ready, said the cries were too loud, too real. And as the nurse stood frozen, the surrogate just stood there, trembling, torn between what was hers and what was never meant to be. She only did it for the money, but now she actually loved the kids.
It all started the day Ilara met Stella Rivera. The rain poured harder than usual that night, soaking Ilara's worn shoes as she hurried down the cracked pavement. Her shift at the diner had ended hours ago, but she stayed back, counting tips that could barely buy her mother's medicine. Every cent mattered, and still it was never enough. Her mother's lungs were failing. The doctors had said she needed surgery soon, but Ilara had no savings, no family left, and no hope in sight. At 24, she learned that love and kindness didn't pay hospital bills. Still, she worked, smiled, and prayed. That was when the woman walked into her life, Stella Rivera, the famous top model whose face filled billboards and magazine covers. Ilara had seen her only in commercials, always draped in diamonds and poise. But that night, Stella wasn't glowing. She was desperate. "I need a woman," Stella said bluntly, sliding into the diner booth. Her voice was low, her sunglasses still on despite the dim lights. "I need a woman, a healthy woman, who can give me something I can't have." Ilara frowned, unsure she'd heard it right. "I don't understand." Stella leaned closer. "A baby. My husband wants one. I don't. It'll ruin my career, my body, my freedom. But he won't stop insisting. So I need someone else to do it for me." Ilara's heart skipped. "You mean surrogacy?" Stella nodded, her eyes sharp. "Legally and cleanly done. You'll be paid enough to change your life forever." Money, hope, her mother's life. The words spun in her head like wild fireflies. But behind the offer, she saw the emptiness in Stella's gaze, not longing for a child, but fear of losing control. "Why me?" Ilara asked softly. "Because you're healthy, and because poor women never say no." The words stung, but Ilara swallowed her pride. Poverty had taught her silence. Within a week, the contract was signed. The name Caleb Harrington, Stella's billionaire husband, appeared on every page. Caleb was a man Ilara had only seen from afar, calm, dignified, but distant. He spoke little during their brief meetings, always polite, always guarded. During the medical process, Ilara promised herself she wouldn't get attached. It was just a deal, a sacrifice for her mother's survival. But as weeks turned to months and the tiny life grew inside her, everything changed. The first time she felt a flutter, she cried in the clinic's restroom, her hands over her belly. "Hey there, little one. I don't know if I'll ever get to hold you, but I'll love you while I can." Each kick, each heartbeat made her bond with the unseen babies stronger. She stopped seeing it as a job and began to dream of them at night. Small faces, soft cries, love that could never be replaced. Then, one afternoon, Caleb showed up at the clinic alone. No Stella, no cameras, just a man standing awkwardly in a waiting room full of pregnant women. "Ilara," he said gently, "I wanted to check how you're feeling." His tone carried something Stella never had, kindness. For a moment, Ilara forgot he was a billionaire and she was just a contract. They spoke briefly, mostly about the babies. Caleb's eyes softened when she said, "They kick every time someone laughs near me. I think they already love joy." He smiled faintly. "Then they'll love you forever." It was the first time anyone had said something kind to her in months. That night, she placed her hands on her belly and cried. Not out of fear, but from the ache of knowing she'd soon have to let go. As her due date drew near, Stella became colder. She didn't visit or call. Her assistant handled every medical arrangement. Ilara tried to focus on her mother's recovery and the promise of a better life. But deep inside, she feared the emptiness waiting for her after the birth. On the night before delivery, she sat by the hospital window, whispering to the two gentle heartbeats beneath her ribs. "I don't know where you'll end up, my loves," she said through tears, "but wherever you go, know that your first home was filled with love." Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft, steady, endless. And as dawn crept across the sky, Ilara felt the first contraction. The deal that would save her mother's life was about to break her heart.
The cries of newborn babies filled the hospital room. Two tiny voices, fragile yet full of life. Ilara's heart swelled as she looked at the twin boys she had carried for 9 long months. One had Caleb's dark hair and calm eyes. The other had a dimple just like hers. She smiled through tears, whispering, "You're both perfect." But the joy didn't last. Moments later, the door opened and Stella Rivera walked in. Tall, beautiful, and expressionless, wearing sunglasses indoors as if afraid of facing reality. Behind her was Caleb, silent and uneasy. When the nurse announced, "Congratulations, you have twin boys," Stella froze. Her face twisted in disbelief. "Twins?" she repeated sharply. "No one said anything about twins." The nurse looked startled. "Ma'am, it happens sometimes with the procedure. Both embryos—" "I only agreed to one child," she snapped, cutting her off. She turned to Caleb. "This isn't what we planned. I can't handle 2. Caleb's jaw tightened. "There are children, Stella, both of them." "They're not mine," she said coldly. "You wanted this. You deal with it." Ilara clutched the blanket tighter around the babies, her heart trembling. "Please, ma'am, they need care, love, someone to hold them." Stella's eyes flicked toward her, sharp and distant. "You've done your job. You'll get your money. That's all." When Stella stormed out, the silence that followed felt like thunder. Caleb remained, staring at the babies, torn between responsibility and his wife's wrath. He finally whispered, "I'm sorry, Ilara. This isn't how it should have gone." Ilara looked up, tears filling her eyes. "Don't be sorry, sir. They didn't ask to be born into this. Please, let me stay and take care of them. I don't want your money. Just let me be their nanny." Caleb's brows furrowed. "You'd stay here? After everything?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I'll feed them, rock them, love them, until you and your wife decide what to do. I can't walk away from them now." He hesitated. The request was strange, maybe even risky, but something about her voice, the quiet devotion, the selflessness, made him nod slowly. "All right," he said after a long silence. "You'll stay at the mansion as their nanny, but you must understand, once Stella decides, it could all change." Ilara nodded, clutching the babies closer. "I understand, sir." 2 days later, a black limousine pulled up in front of the Harrington Mansion, a sprawling glass and marble estate that looked like another world to Ilara. She stepped out, holding one twin in her arms while a nurse carried the other. Mrs. Lorraine, the elderly housekeeper, met them at the door with a kind smile. "You must be Miss Ilara, the new nanny, right? Welcome, dear." Ilara managed a polite smile, though her heart trembled. Nanny. The word both comforted and wounded her. Inside, everything sparkled.
chandeliers, golden frames, marble floors that echoed with emptiness. Stella was nowhere to be found. Caleb showed Ilara to the nursery, a bright, peaceful room filled with toys and tiny clothes that had never been touched. "You'll have everything you need," he said quietly. "Just make sure they're happy." "I will," Ilara replied, gazing at the sleeping babies. "That's all I've ever wanted." When Caleb left, she sat beside the crib, tracing the baby's soft hands with trembling fingers. "You're safe now. Even if I'm just your nanny, I'll be your home." Days turned into weeks. Stella traveled for fashion shows, barely stepping foot in the nursery. The babies grew fast, smiling, gurgling, filling the mansion with new life. Mrs. Lorraine often stopped by, watching Ilara hum lullabies. "You care for them like they're yours," the old woman said one evening. Ilara smiled faintly. Maybe love doesn't need a title. Caleb began noticing, too. Sometimes he stood quietly by the nursery door, watching Ilara rock the twins to sleep. She never noticed him. Her world was wrapped entirely around the babies. For the first time in years, Caleb felt warmth in the house. But that warmth was dangerous, because somewhere between duty and affection, he found himself drawn to the woman who had given everything and asked nothing. One night, as thunder rolled outside, Ilara stayed up late feeding the twins. The storm shook the windows, but the babies were calm in her arms. Caleb stepped in quietly, watching her from the doorway. "You should rest," he said softly. She looked up, startled but smiling. "I can't. They're still hungry." He moved closer, his voice low. "You're not just their nanny, Ilara. You're their peace." Her hands trembled. She looked away, whispering, "I'm just keeping my promise, sir." Caleb sighed, staring at the babies. "You're doing more than that." Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, and in that brief light, two hearts began to feel something neither of them expected.
The Harrington mansion was vast, but Ilara only cared for one small corner of it, the nursery. The pastel-colored room was her world, and the two little boys in it were her reason to wake up each day. Morning light streamed through the curtains as the twins giggled in their crib, their laughter echoing softly against the marble walls. Ilara smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face as she leaned over them. "Good morning, my sunshine and moonlight," she whispered. "Let's make today happy, huh?" She had given them pet names, Liam and Noah, though she dared not say them aloud when others were around. In the official documents, they had fancy names Stella had picked from a magazine. But to Ilara, they were just her boys, her miracle. Mrs. Lorraine often peeked into the nursery, her wrinkled face lighting up at the sight. "You're magic with them, dear," she said one morning, folding the twins' laundry. "They calm down the second you walk in." Ilara smiled softly. "Maybe they remember my heartbeat," she whispered. The old woman paused, studying her. "What do you mean by that?" Ilara quickly changed the subject, pretending to adjust the baby blanket. "I just mean they know who loves them, ma'am." Mrs. Lorraine said nothing more, but her eyes lingered a moment too long, as if she sensed a truth Ilara couldn't hide forever. Stella rarely came home. Her world revolved around photo shoots, fashion shows, and endless social events. When she did appear, she'd walk past the nursery without a glance, her perfume filling the air long after she'd gone. One afternoon, she entered unannounced, her phone pressed to her ear. "Tell them I'll be in Paris by morning," she said sharply to her assistant. Then she noticed Ilara rocking one of the twins. "Why are they crying again?" she asked, irritation dripping from her voice. They're teething, ma'am. They just need comfort." Stella sighed, glancing at her reflection in the mirror instead of the baby. "Comfort," she muttered. "They're spoiled already." Ilara's heart ached, but she bit her tongue. There was no point in arguing with a woman who measured life in camera flashes and applause. After Stella left, Caleb walked in, his expression heavy. He had overheard. "She doesn't understand," he murmured, standing beside Ilara. "She doesn't have to," she said gently. "That's why I'm here." He looked at her, really looked at her. The soft light reflected in her tired eyes, the way her arms cradled both babies with care that couldn't be taught. There was something sacred in her presence, something the mansion had never known before. "You've changed this house," he said quietly. Ilara blinked in surprise. "I've only done my job, sir." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe you do it too well." As weeks passed, a subtle closeness began to form. Caleb started joining them in the nursery after work. He'd sit beside Ilara, listening as she sang lullabies in her low, soothing voice. Sometimes he'd hold one of the babies, awkward but learning. "They trust you," Ilara would say, smiling. "I think I'm learning to trust again, too," he'd reply, half to himself. But with every moment shared, guilt crept in. Ilara knew she was crossing an invisible line. She was only a nanny. He was her employer. And yet, when their hands brushed while passing a bottle, her heart would skip. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Caleb stood by the nursery door, watching Ilara put the twins to sleep. She hummed a familiar tune, the same one she used to sing to them before they were born. Caleb frowned slightly. "That song?" Ilara froze. "What about it?" "I've heard it before. At the clinic. When you were pregnant," he said slowly, realization dawning. "You used to hum it to them, didn't you?" Her heart stopped. She tried to speak, but her lips trembled. Before she could answer, one of the babies stirred, breaking the tension. She used the moment to turn away, murmuring, "It's just a song that soothes them." But Caleb knew. There was something unspoken between them, something that felt both dangerous and right. Later that night, as she cleaned up the nursery, Mrs. Lorraine came in quietly. "You should be careful, dear. The way he looks at you and the way you look back, people will start to talk." Ilara's heart pounded. "I don't mean to feel anything, Mrs. Lorraine. I love the children." The old woman nodded knowingly. "Sometimes love doesn't ask who it belongs to. It just happens." Ilara looked down at the sleeping twins, her voice trembling. "Then I hope it never shows." But it had already. And beyond the nursery doors, jealousy was starting to stir in a heart that refused to share.
Stella Harrington returned from Paris with a heart full of restlessness and whispers she couldn't silence. During a magazine shoot, a makeup artist had mentioned casually, "Your nanny seems to adore those babies. The whole internet's talking about how sweet she is." The words burned deeper than they should have. Stella had agreed to let Ilara, their surrogate, stay on as nanny. It seemed practical at the time. She didn't want sleepless nights, crying infants, or spit-stained designer gowns. Ilara had offered to stay, and Stella had said yes without much thought. But now, it felt like she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. When Stella walked into the mansion that morning, the sound of laughter floated down the hall. It wasn't Caleb's, it was Ilara's, soft and full of warmth. She followed it to the nursery and froze at the door. Ilara sat on the floor, her hair slightly messy, the twins in her lap giggling as she tickled them. Caleb stood nearby, smiling, actually smiling, something Stella hadn't seen in months. For a moment, Stella couldn't breathe. The scene looked too perfect, too natural. "Looks like you're both enjoying family time," she said coldly from the doorway. Ilara quickly stood, startled. "Mrs. Harrington, I didn't hear you come in." Caleb turned. "You're home early. I wanted to see my family, but clearly someone else has that covered." Ilara bit her lip. "The twins were fussy. I was just trying to—" "I didn't ask for excuses," she cut her off. "You forget your place too easily." Caleb frowned. "That's enough, Stella. She's just doing her job." "Oh, you'd know," she shot back, her jealousy spilling through every word. "You spend more time here than you do in our own room." The air went cold. Caleb's voice lowered. "Don't start this again." "No? You think I don't notice the way you look at her, or how the twins reach for her before they reach for me?" Her words trembled, half anger, half hurt. Ilara's eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Harrington, please, I never meant to—" "Don't act innocent," she hissed. "You've had what I'll never have, their love, his attention. You think I don't see it?" "Enough!" Caleb raised his voice. The baby startled and began to cry. "You're upsetting them." Stella's composure cracked. "Of course they're crying. They don't even know who their mother is." The words hit Ilara like a slap. She turned away, wiping her tears. Caleb stepped forward, lowering his tone. "Stella, you asked her to stay. She's cared for them, loved them, done everything you wouldn't. Don't punish her for filling the space you left empty." That only made Stella tremble harder. "You think I'm heartless?" "I think you're lost, Stella. And instead of finding your way back, you're trying to tear down the one person keeping this family together." That night, Stella stood alone in front of her vanity mirror, staring at her reflection. The perfect makeup, the flawless skin, but none of it could hide the truth. For the first time, she didn't feel beautiful. She felt replaceable. Down the hall, she could hear the twins' soft cries, followed by Ilara's soothing hum, that same lullaby Stella never learned the words to. Caleb's low voice joined in, gentle, calm. And that was the moment Stella realized what scared her most. It wasn't losing her husband to another woman. It was losing the only version of motherhood she'd ever known, one built on status and appearance, not love. Days passed, tension hanging thick in the air. Caleb and Ilara kept their distance, careful not to give Stella more reason to rage. But love doesn't disappear just because it's forbidden. It lingers in the silence, in the glances, in the way hearts beat faster when they shouldn't. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Stella made her decision. She entered the nursery, where Ilara rocked the twins. "I appreciate everything you've done, but your services won't be needed anymore." Ilara froze. "Ma'am? I want you to leave tomorrow. I'll find another nanny." Caleb walked in just then, his face hardening. "Stella, what is this?" "I want my home back," she said, her chin trembling, "before it belongs entirely to someone else." Ilara felt her chest tighten. "Please, don't take me from them. They need me." "And I need my life back," she whispered. She turned and left, her heels clicking away, leaving behind the sound of quiet sobs and two babies who would soon learn what emptiness meant.
The morning Ilara left the Harrington mansion, the sky seemed to mourn with her. Raindrops slid down the tall glass windows as she stepped through the front door with a single suitcase in hand. She turned once, just once, to glance back at the nursery window, the room that had been her world. Behind the curtain's blur, she could almost imagine the faint cries of the twins she'd sung to sleep night after night. "Goodbye, my darlings," she whispered through trembling lips. "Mama loves you, always will." Then she walked down the stone path, her shoes soaking in the rain, until the mansion disappeared behind her. Her mother's little house sat on the edge of the countryside, surrounded by old trees and the soft scent of rain-soaked earth. When Elara arrived, Mrs. Grace opened the door, her once frail frame now stronger, her smile warm. "Elara," she gasped, pulling her daughter into a trembling embrace. "You're home." Tears fell freely as Elara clung to her mother. "I had nowhere else to go, Mama. I didn't know what to do." Her mother cupped her face gently. "You don't need to explain. A mother always knows when her child's heart is broken." Inside, the old home still smelled of baked bread and lavender oil. It wasn't grand like the mansion, but it carried a peace that soothed Elara's weary soul. That evening, as rain pattered softly on the roof, Mrs. Grace made her daughter tea and said, "I'm feeling much better now. The doctor says my health is improving. Maybe God wanted you back here for a reason." Elara smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "Maybe he did, but I can't stop thinking about them, Mama. The twins, my babies." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "Love doesn't die just because distance grows. Sometimes the heart has to let go to protect what it loves." Meanwhile, the Harrington mansion had grown quieter, painfully so. The twins cried endlessly, their tiny voices echoing through the halls. No lullaby could soothe them, no gentle hand could calm them. Stella hired and fired 3 nannies within a week, each one leaving in frustration. "Why won't they stop crying?" she cried one night, her hair undone, her patience gone. "They miss her," Mrs. Lorraine said simply. "Babies know love when they feel it. Miss Elara gave them that." Caleb stood by the doorway, guilt heavy on his face. He had watched his home turn into a place of grief. Even Stella's anger had dulled into exhaustion. He missed Elara, her laughter, her quiet strength, the way she made chaos feel calm. The emptiness she left behind was more than absence. It was a reminder of everything he had failed to protect. In her mother's house, Elara tried to start over. She began helping at a local daycare, spending her days surrounded by children who weren't her own, but still warmed her heart. She'd sit by the window at night, humming softly, the same lullaby she used to sing to the twins. Sometimes her mother would listen quietly from the kitchen, tears in her eyes. "You still sing to them," she said one night. Elara smiled faintly. "Every night. Maybe somehow they'll hear me." Back at the mansion, Stella stood in the nursery, watching the twins wail in their cribs. Her hands trembled as she tried to hold one, but the baby only cried harder. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why won't they love me?" Caleb, standing beside her, sighed deeply. "They just miss what they know. You can't blame them for that." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I thought sending her away would make things right, but now it feels like everything's wrong." Caleb looked at her, for once not angry, only tired. "Maybe what's right isn't always what we want. Maybe it's what's needed." Stella met his gaze, her lip trembling. "And what's needed, Caleb?" He hesitated, then said softly, "Her. For them. Maybe even for us." 2 days later, Caleb stood outside Mrs. Grace's modest home, rain still drizzling lightly. Through the window, he saw Elara reading to a group of neighborhood kids, her gentle voice wrapping the room in warmth. When she noticed him, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Mr. Harrington," she breathed, stepping outside. "Caleb," he said quietly. "Please, call me Caleb." He paused, then spoke the words that had weighed on his heart for weeks. "The twins need you. The house feels dead without you, and so do I." Elara's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can go back." "I'm not asking you to go back for us. Go back for them. They need your love, and maybe in helping them heal, we'll all find a way to heal too." She looked at him, her heart torn but hopeful. For the first time since leaving, she saw honesty in his eyes, not pity, not obligation, but something deeper. "Let me think about it," she whispered. Caleb nodded. "Take your time. Just don't say no." As he left, Mrs. Grace stepped beside her daughter, smiling softly. Sometimes what's broken can be mended, not by running, but by returning. Ilara looked up at the cloudy sky, tears glistening on her lashes. Maybe it's time to stop running, Mama. And in that quiet moment, she knew love wasn't finished with her yet.
The next morning, the clouds broke open to a soft sunrise. Dew glistened on the grass outside Mrs. Grace's home, and birds sang faintly as if the world itself wanted to start over. Ilara woke with a heaviness that had softened into thought. Caleb's words from the day before still echoed in her mind. They need your love. Maybe in helping them heal, we'll all find a way to heal too. Over breakfast, Mrs. Grace watched her daughter stare quietly at her tea. "You didn't sleep," she said knowingly. Ilara shook her head. "I kept seeing their faces, Mama. The twins. I wonder if they still remember me." Her mother smiled gently. "Love like yours doesn't fade, Ilara. Those babies will always know your voice, even if they don't understand why." By noon, Ilara found herself standing once again in front of the Harrington mansion, that grand house that once broke her heart. The rain had washed the stone clean, and the garden smelled of fresh earth and roses. When the gate opened, Caleb was already waiting. He didn't speak, just smiled, a small, hopeful smile that said, "Thank you for coming." Inside, the sound of laughter caught him off guard. The twins were in the nursery, crawling across the floor, their tiny hands reaching for colorful blocks, but the moment they saw her, they froze, then squealed in delight. "Eloah!" little Lila babbled, unable to pronounce her name properly. Her heart nearly gave out. She dropped to her knees, and the twins rushed into her arms, clinging to her as if afraid she'd vanish again. She kissed their hair, their cheeks, whispering, "Mama's here, my loves. Mama's here." Tears filled Caleb's eyes as he watched them, not just tears of joy, but of remorse and release. A quiet cough came from behind. Stella stood at the doorway, her face paled but calm. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Stella stepped forward, her voice trembling. "I didn't think you'd come back." Ilara rose slowly, still holding the babies. "Neither did I." Stella exhaled shakily. "I was wrong, Ilara. About everything. I thought pushing you away would make me feel like a real mother, but it only made me feel empty." Caleb moved closer, placing a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. "We've all made mistakes," he said softly. "What matters is what we do now." Stella looked at Ilara, her eyes glistening. "Can we start over? For them?" Ilara's throat tightened. "For them," she said, nodding. And in that moment, under the soft hum of the nursery light, the three of them stood together, not as broken pieces of a deal gone wrong, but as a patchwork family finding healing in forgiveness. Months passed, and harmony quietly returned to the Harrington home. The twins thrived, laughter replacing the silence that once filled the halls. Stella, no longer consumed by fame, found joy in reading bedtime stories. Caleb spent more time at home than at his office. Ilara continued to care for the twins, but now it wasn't employment, it was purpose. She and Stella became unlikely friends, bound by the same love for two little souls who had changed all their lives. One afternoon, Caleb called them both into the living room. Papers lay on the table beside a small golden plaque that read, "The Hope Circle Foundation." "It's official," Caleb said, smiling. "The foundation is registered.
We'll provide free counseling and financial support to underprivileged couples trying to conceive and help them understand surrogacy the right way. Ilara's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Caleb, that's incredible." Stella nodded, her eyes warm. "We want to honor what brought us together, even the pain. If we can help one family find hope the way we did, then it's worth everything." Tears shimmered in Ilara's eyes as she whispered, "You've turned what was once my heartbreak into something beautiful." Stella took her hand. "You showed us what real motherhood looks like." The twins toddled into the room then, their laughter bright and endless. Ilara knelt to scoop them up, one in each arm, while Caleb and Stella watched, smiling, content. For the first time, there were no boundaries, no hidden pain, just love reborn from loss. Later that evening, as Ilara stood outside watching the sunset beyond the garden, Mrs. Grace joined her. "You see, my dear," her mother said softly, "sometimes God doesn't end stories, He rewrites them." Ilara smiled, her eyes glistening in the golden light. "And sometimes what breaks your heart becomes the very thing that heals it." The wind stirred the trees gently, carrying with it the faint laughter of children and the quiet promise of a new beginning.
Sometimes life's most painful bargains aren't written on paper. They're carved into the heart. Ilara's journey began with desperation, wrapped in sacrifice and loss. But through the ache, she discovered that love, real love, doesn't fade with distance or time. It grows, it forgives, and it finds its way home. Stella learned that motherhood isn't defined by perfection or pride, but by the courage to accept love in all its forms. And Caleb, he learned that family isn't built by wealth, but by the hands willing to hold on when everything else falls apart. What began as a deal that broke one woman's heart became a bond that healed three. Because sometimes the very thing that shatters you is the same thing that saves you. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it so more people can find hope through stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and remember, every broken heart has a story worth telling.